2015 to 2017 was a notable period in League's history for marking a definitive turning point between the old, cookie-cutter champion designs of the early days and the more contemporary, if not unusual designs we see now. 2016 in particular featured a most unusual lineup of cast members whose kits and playstyles could not be more unorthodox even if they tried. Jhin, Talia, Kled, Ivern, and Aurelion Sol. Empirically speaking, results were hit or miss. On one hand, we had a very successful design in Jhin, quite possibly the most well-received in history, but on the other hand, people weren't all that interested or receptive towards the remaining. Aurelion Sol in particular was especially hard to wrap our heads around, being the only champion in the game who demanded spacing in the most literal sense of the word, more often than not in an unproductive way. He was so unpopular that Riot had to reimagine his gameplay to nearly the same extent as a full VGU, where the Sol we have today scarcely resembles that of his past iteration. Though his play rate has indeed reached a more gainful number in comparison, Sol's back to a low relevance state despite having a measurably more practical kit. As their 2 episodes on the champion wasn't enough, I feel like it's necessary to give him a third, since we're essentially discussing a totally different character. So in today's episode of Why No One Plays, we'll talk about how the Starforger's been struggling to maintain consistent presence even post-gameplay update. The factors responsible for his decline in relevance can be split into 3 separate parts, and I feel like it's important to discuss all of them at length as each of them contributed to his loss of presence. Like with most reworks or gameplay updates, the initial spike of a champion's popularity is considerable as players are interested in checking out their new gameplay and how strong they might be. For Aurelion Sol though, that jump was nothing short of unbelievable. From a sub 1% play rate that skyrocketed up to over 15%, he was an overnight sensation to say the least, and quite competent too. Much of that can be written off as having overtuned numbers, and that definitely played a part, but pragmatically and objectively, Riot succeeded at reimagining Sol's kit in a way that made him more usable for a broader audience. However, in order for them to have done this, they had to essentially strip away a significant part of his identity that, while unquestionably a detriment to his popularity, housed most of his unique strengths that few if any other mages could offer, establishing the first big part of his current unpopularity. Aurelion Sol is too easily comparable to other mages that it becomes a contest of numbers as to who you should pick, and that's a contest that Sol's currently losing. The advantage of his old passive was that it fundamentally made him a consistent threat to the enemy team. While Star Surge and Voice of Light were powerful tools when used optimally, especially the former after they made it so you could generate a star with a large enough mass to take up the literal entire screen, where his DPS really came from was of course center of the universe, causing an orbit of 3 stars to damage enemies that came into contact with them. These stars would be perpetually active with the exception of being under crowd control, making it easy for him to damage enemies without even having to give his undivided attention to them like other mages do. In a sense, Sol had some of the best AoE pressure in the game, of which you could exert it on the enemy team even as soon as level 2. A single cast of his W could simultaneously push the wave at a rate far quicker than anyone else can match and harass the enemy laner. Not too late after, thanks to his Comet of Legend having a semi-global radius while being a basic ability, Sol could roam around the map and get stuff done very early in the game. A star player who he had a reputation for exploiting that privilege to gain a sizable lead for his team even before the 5-minute mark. Then during the mid to late game, his stars would continuously grow in strength while at the same time keeping their inconspicuous nature. Throughout a teamfight, Sol would be racking up an insane amount of DPS on the enemy team, but it would also be more difficult for them to know or see where it's coming from given how small stars were in comparison to all the explosions and stuff happening. More importantly, his Star Surge could single-handedly win his team the game when prepared properly, and in general, his focus was about control. Unlike other battle mages who typically wanted to stay in a certain spot, Sol was also quite hard to fight without either speed or lockdown, as he was one of the few mages in League who could continuously attack you while moving around, making him very good at kiting and spacing. Ultimately, yes, his unconventional way of attacking made him one of the most, if not the most unpopular modern champion in the game, but for those willing to pick him up, he carried a repertoire no other mage could even hope to match. After being updated, Sol became much more of a generic battle mage, someone who could attack in mid-range and continuously apply DPS while also establishing control of an area, but in turn, he was brought in line with other battle mages, pitting his numbers and performance against theirs. Now that's not to say he no longer has the explosion factor he once had. Falling Star, while not the highest damaging ultimate in the game, makes its presence known, that's for sure, having one of the largest effect radii of any attack in the game even among other ultimates. But from a base kit point of view, he became more, I suppose, generic if we're putting it bluntly. For sure, it made him more popular initially, but again, that was only because Sol had overinflated numbers that were severely and repeatedly put down to prevent him from over-dominating the metagame, which he unsurprisingly did post-rework. Starting from 13.13 when he got his comprehensive gameplay update, Sol received 13 numbers adjustments dating to June of this year. Of those 13, wanna guess how many of them were nerfs? 10 of them. Of the remaining 3, which one was the direct buff? Only one. The other 2 were just power budget swaps that weren't intended to be a net positive. Asol's new kit was so good at being a battle mage that he would almost consistently overpower most other battle mages. He was out DPSing Rumble, Swain, Talia, Victor, Vladimir, Anivia, Karthus, Malzahar by a considerable margin, especially given his infinite scaling and extreme area control. For example, Breath of Light was for all intents and purposes a better Rumble queue as he could cast and recast it at a much faster rate while also having it active for as long as he could pay the mana cost. The range of the attack also capped at 920, far exceeding most battle mage ranges and giving him one of the best neutral games out of the entire cast. Now that Astral Flight was also made into a combat-oriented spell, he could additionally move while attacking, using it to chase enemies or running away while attacking them, giving him an even wider threat radius and the ability to act as cover fire for his team. As he grew Singularity, it would essentially be an Anivia ultimate on a basic ability, giving him tons of area control when used in tandem with Rylai's, becoming a living nightmare for any champion without a dash ability. Asol's teamfight pressure had around the same extent as his previous iteration, the only difference was that it was a lot easier to apply, which only made the sheer power he had more conspicuous. The reason they had to nerf him over and over and then keep nerfing him even after he felt so weak was because Asol was really just that strong. Much of the roster straight up had no way to deal with him on their own, causing an infinite scaling champion to essentially get a free pass to scale and then keep scaling. He was basically Smolder if Smolder had double his current cast range and double the wave clear. Asol didn't have to risk anything to scale because of his neutral game and lenient margin for error, so they had to push him into a gutted state to avoid dealing with it. Putting it simply, Asol is a balanced nightmare. Believe it or not, old Asol was extremely overtuned. We just didn't see it because 1, you'd run into him once every maybe 200 games, and 2, he was a lot harder to play given how conditional every part of his kit was, including his DPS. Now that he's way more consistent, it became apparent that each of his abilities are individually so strong that he would just outclass every other battle mage in League. He could control way more area than Anivia, Swain, Karthus, and Rumble, champions notorious for impacting entire battlefields at once. He had more range than Cassiopeia, Ryze, and Talia, other machine gun champions. He also had more front-loader burst pressure than Victor and Vladimir, especially with a primed falling star. Battle mages typically hang around the 650 to 800 range. Asol could attack around 900 plus. Astral Flight could extend it even further, letting him challenge artillery mages at a distance, while also permakiting immobile burst mages like Brand, Vhagar, and Twisted Fate who could never get close enough to one-shot him even if they did have the means to. Under no circumstances would I say he has no weaknesses. We're gonna get to that in just a moment. What I am saying is that a byproduct of his new design was that he became too good of a champion that the only quote-unquote safe place to put him is in an underpowered state. Aurelion Sol is a classic example of a champion with a concept so good that a mountain of restrictions had to be put on him that ultimately rendered the potential of that concept irrelevant. As he got weaker, so too did the player base's desire to play him, but due to his design, he can never get stronger beyond a certain point or else he becomes unfair to play against. If that sounds familiar to you, it's because a number of champions already have that problem like Annie, a stat check mage who cannot be truly allowed to 100 to 0 target without being super fed on account of her burst rotation being practically guaranteed. But since all she can do is burst, if she isn't allowed to, then what's the point? Though it may not look like it, Asol is also a stat checker who doesn't have many ways to outplay his opponent while conversely not giving his opponent many ways to outplay him. Despite not having a single point and click ability in his kit, all of Asol's attacks are impossible to dodge by just moving away in time. Breath of Light has an instant cast time, meaning the time it takes for a space vomit to go from him to you is 0. He presses it, you take damage. Singularity and Falling Star, their area coverage is too big for anyone to realistically sidestep it in time. This implies the only way you can deal with him is if you have some way to interrupt him, get out of the way immediately, or just try to kill him faster than he can kill you. A sizable portion of the roster just doesn't have an answer against Asol, emphasizing why they have to keep him underpowered. Once he buys Rylai's, he can Q spam on you, chipping away your health while you struggle to catch up to him unless you have a dash or lockdown of some kind. The inverse is what brings us to the second factor affecting his diminishing play rate. Aurelion Sol also can't really do anything against the champions who do have the means to shut him down. Much like his Pyre version, he's best at home when playing the neutral game, not really full committing to attacking, but also not being forced to defend. The more he can free fire on you with Q, the better, so if he's caught in a situation where he needs to act fast, he might be even worse at that than his past version. At least old Asol had Voice of Light to use as a get off me tool against opponents who tried to engage on him. New Asol has literally nothing except Astral Flight, which is too slow and too vulnerable to any champion that can rush him down quickly or hard CC him out of it. All of his worst matchups happen to comprise champions who could do one or both. Yona is by far his worst enemy, wow, shocker, because he can chase him down to the ends of the earth while perma-CCing him all throughout. Then we have champions like Echo who can also rush him down and stun him with W. Annie who, if she does manage to get in range, nukes the hell out of him before he gets to setup. Diana who can rush him down then use Moonfall's brief interruption to stop him from flying away. Cassidy who can also do the same. Zed who can chase him down forever and blast him quickly. Irelia who can rush him down and keep rushing him down. Katarina who blinks around all over the place, preventing Asol from marinating her with this Q. Basically, Asol's a menace against tap they cast in light of them having no way to respond against his superior range or astral flight. But in turn, Asol completely folds against the other half of the cast who can blitz him down at a moment's notice and never let him breathe, literally. Matchup volatility to that extent just doesn't reflect on a champion's widespread popularity that well. There needs to be a degree of consistency and agency in handling opposition, and at his current power level, Asol just doesn't have it. But as I elaborated, they can't really give him any more latitude so as not to shut down the other half of the cast with no answer against him. He's a mage who's also a stat checker, not a good combination for balance. Final point pertains to his current situation. In addition to being a stat checker, Asol's an infinite scaler who infinitely scales in more ways than one. The more stardust he generates, the more percent max health damage his Q does, the farther he can travel with his W, the bigger and more deadly his E becomes, and his ultimate can turn into a humongous AoE knockup. Past infinite scalers like Nasus and Vhagar are kept in check because only one part of them gets stronger indefinitely. They still keep their inherent weaknesses from start to finish. Asol not only does more damage, but he gets a bigger attack radius and longer travel distance, making it much easier to apply said increased damage. To counter this, Asol has one of the most unproductive early games of any champion. While he's not as helpless as like a Nasus or Kayle, he also can't really do a whole lot. For the first 10 to 20 minutes of a game, Asol has to kinda just sit in lane and play neutral as much as he can, making him for all intents and purposes a non-existent presence. While he can sit far back and chill by just pushing waves, lane opponents can run around the map and punish you for sitting back. You have no choice in the matter though because of how easy it is to destroy you just like a Kayle, Cassidy, or Nasus. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, unless of course you get camped, but you have a better chance of winning the lottery than your jungler babysitting you for more than 2 games in a row. The higher up you go, the faster games get, the less time you have to scale. People would much rather play someone who can accomplish things immediately. Ironically, that was old Asol's strength. Current Asol just doesn't deliver on that. He may have back when his numbers were high enough to get him to full power by mid-game, but they made it take a lot longer now. To reiterate one final time, Asol is stuck in a catch-22 situation where all positive aspects of him get cancelled out by the negative consequences of those aspects. He needs to be slightly better than he is now for people to want to play him, but he can't be slightly better on account of being a stat checker. Other stat checkers get more leeway because they're inherently kept in line by circumstances like usually being melee. Asol's ranged, with some of the best area coverage in the game, making it that much harder for people to be okay with his pressure than that of a Garen, Darius, or Mordekaiser. Finally, of course, a non-negligible portion of the player base finds his new design to be not that interesting to play. While he was even less popular back in the day, he was certainly more unique than how he is now, where you just Q spam non-stop and that's basically it. He feels too much like just another battle mage, and matchup-wise he's a very inconsistent one, despite battle mages being the most consistent of the 3 subcategories. Personally, I'm still of the opinion that Asol could have kept his old passive in W if they just brought in the new Astral Flight, Singularity, and Falling Star. Each of those abilities makes Center of the Universe a lot easier to apply than Star Surge and Voice of Light ever could. That seems to be the case for a lot of people. I think his Q is just really boring gameplay. More practical, yes, no one can deny that, but there had to have been a way for him to preserve his old niche while modernizing him as opposed to giving him one of the most one-dimensional gameplay loops of any mage I've ever seen. But what do you guys think? Do you agree or disagree with my points on his unpopularity? Let me know in the comments down below. That's it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.